Hello, I'm Dr. David Kading. Welcome to Eyecare's Lit, brought to you by Optometric Insights Media. On today's episode, we're exploring a study on how a nasal spray can boost tears in our Sjögren's patients.
You're listening to Eyecare's Lit, where science meets the clinic. Hosted by Dr. David Kading, we break down the latest research, clinical studies, and real-world insights, turning complex data into practical care for today's eye doctors, from dry eye breakthroughs to myopia management and beyond. This is Eyecare's Lit, brought to you by Optometric Insights Media.
But before we get into that, I want to thank Beatrice for their support of this podcast through a non-restricted educational grant. Sjögren's disease is one of the toughest forms of dry eye that we manage, as most of you know. When the immune system attacks the tear glands, patients struggle with constant irritation, burning, blurred vision. I don't know if any of you have any friends that have Sjögren's, but being out in the world with them really is an eye-opener, not just in the practice. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania performed a pilot study that was published in 2025 in Clinical Ophthalmology, Varenicline solution nasal spray for the treatment of dry eye disease in Sjögren's patients. This treatment, called Varenicline solution nasal spray, or I'm going to refer to it as VNS, uses a low dose of the same compound once known for smoking cessation, but here it's designated to activate the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors inside the nasal cavity. By stimulating the trigeminal parasympathetic reflex, VNS triggers the lacrimal functional unit to produce natural tears. Essentially, it taps into the body's built-in tear wiring. In this, it was a single site center study. It looked at 39 women with moderate to severe Sjögren's, and they used the nasal spray twice daily for 28 days. And researchers measured both symptoms as well as objective measurements. They looked at eye dryness scores, ocular surface staining, Schirmer's test, tear film cytokines before and after the treatment. And by day 28, they noticed statistical significant difference in eye dryness scores, dropping from 56 to 42 with a p-value of 0.01. There was corneal staining improvement with a p-value of less than 0.001, and conjunctival staining improved with a p-value of 0.04. So if you see p-values and you hear them and you don't know what they mean, it's a confidence tracker. The smaller the number, the more certain the results are. So if you hear p equals 0.01, what that means is that there's only about a 1% chance that the finding was just random noise. In other words, we can be pretty confident when we see those p-values being very low. Tear secretions increased significantly in the most severe subgroup, and that's kind of unique, and that's pretty substantial for those Sjögren's patients. Even for those patients who had Schirmer's less than 5 millimeters, which is pretty profound, the patients who had more moderate dryness didn't quite get that same level of improvement. There was common side effects that we would have expected, mostly sneezing, reported by half of the participants, but there was no serious or systemic adverse events. Tear samples told a pretty interesting story. After 4 weeks, the VNS reduced several pro-inflammatory cytokines that are tied to Sjögren's. Meanwhile, other levels didn't change significantly, which suggested that it acts through a selective immune modulation rather than just a global suppression like we may see with other types of medication. So the dual action of improving symptoms and inflammation points to a potentially new mechanism for dry eye therapy, that we should be thinking of neurostimulation as an anti-inflammatory signal. Most of the time, we don't think about that neuro component being anti-inflammatory, but kind of key here. For us as clinicians, Sjögren patients often retain some of their functional gland tissue even after years of bombardment from Sjögren's disease. And this study suggests that neural activation can leverage the remaining capacity for those glands. symptom relief in this particular study in just 4 weeks without utilizing drops or immunosuppressant certainly makes it a compelling option that we could consider. If not as a replacement for other therapies, but also, in conjunction with ones that, patients like this are already taking, which most of mine are on a cyclosporin or a lifitegrast. Big picture, very clean nasal spray doesn't just help with symptoms, it helps eyes function better, reduces inflammation, jump-starting the neurotear production, which I don't think we oftentimes think of. So, in Sjögren's patients, this pilot study did, of course, offer some promising signals, and something better for our Sjögren's patients might just be up their nose. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Eyecare's Lit, and thank you to Beatrice for their non-restricted educational grant supporting this project. I'm Dr. David Kading for Optometric Insights Media.